hearing. This afternoon we have scheduled for hearing House Bill number 7171, an act relating to making appropriations in support of fiscal year 2021. This afternoon we'll be looking at Article 10 relating to education, a new article regarding approval of leases for Northern Rhode Island and the Woonsocket Education Center. We'll also be looking at a new article for approval of leases for URI at 25 West Independence Way. Presenting to us this afternoon is Thomas Mulaney, the State Budget Officer, who will provide us with an overview. Angelica Infante-Green, Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education. Courtney Hawkins, the Director of Human Services. Megan Hughes, the President of CCRI. Alex Ogden, the Associate Vice President of CCRI. Amy Grabowski, the Executive Director of Rhode Island Higher Education and Industry Centers. Abigail Ryder, Vice President of URI. Ryan Carrillo, Director of Planning and Real Estate Development at URI. And each of them will be testifying regarding the specific matter we have on the calendar, and we'll identify that for the committee as they present. In addition to the committee members here, we have a few committee members that will be joining the meeting in progress, and Senator Felag and Senator Sosnowski are also present and participating remotely. So with that, I'll invite Tom Mulaney to present the overview.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm going to provide a brief overview of Article 10 and the two new articles requested recently. And then, as you mentioned, we have representatives from several agencies that are impacted by these articles available to provide some additional comments and to answer any questions you might have. So Article 10 is relating to education. This article proposes several changes to statutes relating to various education programs at both elementary and secondary education level, as well as higher education. First, this article amends two categorical programs within the education aid program at RIDE, including expanding the school resource officer program to include mental health professionals, and it renames the English language learners categorical program to the Multilingual Learners categorical to better reflect the goals of this program. Second, this article establishes a universal pre-K program with the goal of expanding pre-K classrooms until every 4-year-old for whom a pre-K seat is sought will have access to one. The governor's budget assumes an increase of 750 seats in FY 2021. In addition, the article proposes to add pre-K students to the education funding formula, which would provide stability in financing this program in the future. The article also establishes an early childhood care and education capital fund to be administered by the Department of Human Services. This fund would provide for competitive grants to early childhood education providers for capital improvements to their facilities, and also support the expansion and development of new facilities. Sources of revenue for this fund include the $15 million general obligation bond proposal that is in Article 5 of the governor's budget. Regarding Rhode Island Promise, Article 10, Section 7 removes the sunset that limits this program to the high school graduating class of 2020. The article would also exclude grants received by students from DCYF or the College Crusade from the calculations of federal or financial aid, and would permit students enrolled in a certificate program to also be qualified for Promise Scholarship. Section 9 of the article expands the eligibility of the Wavemaker program to include STEM teachers, and also extends the sunset date for this program to December of 2023. As you may know, the School Building Authority staff at the Department of Education, they are financed by the Rhode Island Health and Educational Building Corporation. The current fee structure authorized in statute will not permit RIBEC to continue providing this financing much longer. Article 10 proposes to clarify the responsibility for RIBEC to pay for the School Building Authority, and would also restore RIBEC's ability to assess a 1% fee on bonds that it issues on behalf of municipalities for school construction, the funding from which would then be used to support the school building authority. And as the chairman mentioned, there's two new articles that were recently submitted for consideration as part of the 2021 budget. Both of these request the General Assembly's approval for long-term leases. The first lease is for the Northern Rhode Island and Woonsocket Education Center. This center would be very similar to the Westerly Education Center that began operations a couple of years ago. And the second lease is for the University of Rhode Island for property at 25 West Independence Way on the Kingston campus. We have representatives from both the Office of Post-Secondary Commissioner and URI to provide some additional details on these leases later in the hearing. So that's a brief overview of Article 10 and the two new articles. If there are any questions for me, I'd be happy to take them at this time. Or else I'd turn it over to Commissioner Infante-Green. So, Mr. Chairman, what is your pleasure?
Thank you, Mr. Mulaney. I think it probably makes most sense, since we have the presenters here on each specific topic, to proceed with that, so long as the committee is ready to do that, which it appears they are. Let's invite the commissioner to present at this time on education aid, the categorical, STEM teachers, and pre-K.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome to Senate Finance, Commissioner.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. So, good afternoon, Chairman Conley and members of the State Finance Committee. It's my honor to be here with you today, talking about some truly remarkable work happening in education in Rhode Island, and even more ambitious plans that we have for the future. So you'll hear all about that as we move on. In the last few months have been simply unprecedented times for all of us. As you know, dealing with COVID-19 pandemic has presented new challenges almost on a daily basis. And I am incredibly proud of how the education community in Rhode Island has responded. I don't know if you know, but we are national leaders in distance learning at this current moment. So when other states did not move forward, we took the challenge on and we delivered for our community. From the moment the governor and I announced our move to distance learning, school leaders, teachers, students, and the entire community have answered the call to keep schools happening. And now that we are preparing for reopening of schools on August 31st, we are once again seeing that Rhode Island spirit on full display. I am sure you're aware, but I want to highlight a couple of things. We have become national leaders, as I said, but not only that, even as we're talking about reopening, our model has been followed by other states. But no matter how well we responded, we know that the pandemic has made school tougher for most, and if not all our students. We will have a lot of work to do to keep them on pace and close the gaps that existed before COVID-19, and as we close the ones that are widening during the pandemic. Fortunately, we had a plan in place that allowed us to stay organized and focused on moving forward for our students. Our vision for education in Rhode Island contained 3 pillars that provide the foundation for the work that we're doing today and the work that we will be doing in the coming years. It starts with world-class talent. All programs and initiatives in the world-class talent aren't going to make a difference if we don't have experts in instruction in the classroom. That means attracting, retaining, and supporting a talented education force. It also means diversifying our workforce so our teachers are more reflective of our classrooms and supporting educators through high-quality, relevant, ongoing professional development. During this pandemic, we have realized, once again, the importance of professional development as we move forward. That leads us to excellence in learning, high expectations, high standards, as you have prioritized high-quality curriculum for all. Our students need equitable access to the kinds of learning conditions that will maximize achievement, including through social and emotional supports, 21st century school buildings, and engaging career paths, another area which the legislature's support has been invaluable. And as you probably know, we have already met the mandate to have a list of the curriculum a year in advance. So we're really proud of that work. And we were given till January 2021, and in June 2020, we were able to have that list available for all districts. Our work relies on engaged communities. So-called reform efforts are often unsustainable because they're done in the absence of the people they're intended to serve. We continue to elevate student, family, and community voices and give stakeholders a meaningful seat at the table so that our governance structure and systems are more responsive and more nimble. And we've made that commitment statewide. In each of these pillars, RIDE is doing some truly impactful work. We are convening teachers of color to build a bigger community of practice and give us the chance to understand and break down barriers into our profession. We are working with national experts and local districts to ensure more and more students have access to high quality curriculum. We're convening community-led conversations and actions around the turnaround work, what turnaround work really looks like. We are not letting COVID-19 stand in the way of moving forward. There's more work to be done that includes shifting our mindsets. RIDE has historically been an agency that has been focused on compliance. But to be fair, there are many compliance exercises imposed upon us by the federal government, and often for a good reason. Education, after all, is a civil rights issue. But we're flipping the script and shifting to become an agency that is more focused on support, and that is what we have done this entire year. Early this year, for example, we released our early warning system, a tool that brings together a variety of data sets and runs it through an algorithm, that helps identify students who are at risk of dropping out. So we actually now have a tool that gives us a red flag of students that are in danger of not making it through our system. So the data is all there, transparent and accessible, and we went farther, taking an innovative approach of making the data actionable. So what are we going to do? What are the steps that each district can take to make sure that we do not lose one single student? This is just a flavor of what is happening and what's to come from RIDE. Our priorities, the levers we know to push to make a difference for teaching and learning are reflected in the budget before you. We'd like to show you a couple of slides. And it starts with our youngest learners. The research is clear that investments in early childhood education pay dividends. And here in Rhode Island, we are a national leader for quality pre-K programs. We are the state that others look to when it comes to building high quality programs for all. Let's keep the reputation by further investing in our children and expanding the Rhode Island State Pre-K program by another 750 seats. Especially now after COVID-19. This seems more important than ever. So I urge us to really look at these seats. When I speak to school leaders, teachers, and family, expanding pre-K is one of the topics that comes up time after time. So it's increasing the support for our growing population of multilingual learners. Statewide on the RIDEcast, only 8% of our multilingual learners were proficient in ELA. Math was even worse, 6%. This is unconscionable. So what do we need to do? We're requesting that you increase funding for the Multilingual Learner Categorical Fund by $2.5 million, for a total investment of $7.5 million. As part of the categorical, this funding is restricted and may only be used to support and expand quality services for multilingual learners. We will require the funds to serve targeted research-based supports and programs, including, we hope, new bilingual classrooms and programs, recruitment of new multilingual educators, and building capacity for existing staff to better serve the students. The numbers don't lie, and now that we've gotten a taste of being state leaders, we need to continue to look at this population, because I truly believe we can lead in this work, but we need the funding to support it. We have more than 15,000 multilingual learners in Rhode Island. Right now, I'm sad to say we're failing all of them. No longer single-digit proficiency will be allowed. We have to take action, and we have to invest in our kids. And I have to tell you that we are moving in that direction. We're creating a blueprint that will align to this funding. So we really need your support. Next is Wavemaker, $400,000. We also have to invest in our teachers. that is why I'm so pleased that this budget article includes $400,000 to expand the state invested in Rhode Island Wavemaker Fellowship to teachers of science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM. This program incentivizes graduates to stay in Rhode Island and teach STEM-related fields by offering tax credits to defray the cost of student loans. So how could we not do that? We want to encourage our teachers that are in the science fields to stay with us. Right now, we are short. Almost every single district is short. This is an ability that we have with just a little bit amount of money to incentivize this work. Mental health professionals, $2 million. The proposed budget makes two important investments in mental health. The first is $2 million investments in what was termed the school resource officer. If you recall, that categorical. But it is actually broader than that. It's time to invest more of the funds in mental health professionals, student assistants, counselors, school counselors, social workers, and school psychologists would all be eligible under this proposal, putting more qualified, caring individuals in front of students who need their help. This has to be a whole systemic approach. And right now, we know that we're going to need it. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and now more than ever is this relevant. Mental health teacher training. Once again, $590,000. In addition, we would want $590,000 to be dedicated to mental health training for teachers. Because the fact is, our kids are facing anxiety, depression, bullying at a more alarming rate. And we need every adult that stands in front of them to be equipped to offer support, assistance, and a friendly ear. And that is even more critical to endure the trauma of the global pandemic. My team and I are happy to answer questions. But first, I want to thank you for your support and partnership. And I have to say that we have been able to accomplish so many things in this year, much more than we thought. We have a report called In the Pursuit of Excellence. It's more than just a title to me. It's an organizing principle of our work together. And you are valuable partners in that work. And I have always felt the support, and I want to continue and work with you so that we can move our state education department in a direction that we can continue to be leaders. That's not something that we could have said 13 months ago. So I'm very proud to be here, be working with you and for you. Thank you for all your support.
Thank you, Commissioner. We do have a few questions from committee members. Senator Pearson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, and it looks like maybe Deputy Commissioner Riley and Andy with you. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for all you've been doing. I know that you've had to sort of transform everything you thought you were going to be working on this year and do something completely different. And so good to be back here, though, and back to talking about some of the issues. As we sort of attempt to put together a budget in the next few weeks, I think some of the things that we're going to be forced to balance are, you know, what are the new realities in this COVID era that we need to deal with? What was in the governor's original proposal? What was in the Senate task force report related to the funding formula in education? And really, what are we hearing as far as the needs from, you know, our local districts and trying to pull all that together? And so, you know, certainly a goal of mine as we put this together is, I think actually Senator Cano, DePalma, Murray, Palino, Seveny, and Chairman Conley, I think all the senators actually here today were part of the task force that worked on that. And I don't want to lose sight of that work that the Senate had done in making sure that we continue to advance those. And I think that surely we understand that some of the items that we had proposed did have fiscal impacts and may be more difficult this year, but there are some things that may not. And so I wanted to kind of ask a few different questions to hear your opinions or current thoughts. I know we spent a lot of time early in the year talking about some of these things, but in the light of today's world, I figured there's a few spots that I think we may be able to keep the momentum going in some of those areas that we mutually wanted to work on. And I wanted to sort of ask your current opinion on some of those, given sort of everything that's changed, if that's okay. So the first one really is around the multilingual learner. So one of the things that we had, as the Senate worked on, one of the things we consistently heard from districts was the under-identification of ELL students. And one of the key things there, I think we've all heard, is around districts just don't have the resources they need to support ELL students, which largely has led to this categorical and the continued pressure to increase it. But one of the things when we started looking into the data, we actually found that we were under-identifying. So by using that free and reduced lunch identifier as the only way, we were under-identifying 2,695 students, albeit the data at the time that we had, that were ELL students, but were not receiving the ELL funding within the funding formula, the extra 40% success factor. So one of the things that we had proposed was, rather than continue to have this categorical, how could we better identify those students and make sure that the extra 40% success factor meant to get to all of those almost 2,700 students actually got there. And when we did the math out on that, it ensured that we did add money to English language learners. So it did add, it came to a total cost of $7.7 million under that model versus the categorical of $7.5 million. So it effectively adds the same amount of money plus $200,000 than what the governor was proposing, but I believe it may more precisely target that money to make sure that all those students who are those ELL learners are receiving that and we can track it. And it's not something that's subject to legislative appropriation every year in the categorical. It's more baked into the funding formula itself. So wanted to sort of get your opinion on that, given where we are today, if that may be a model that we should think about going in that direction.
Well, so I do agree that we've changed a little bit of how we identify. We've been working on that. Actually, we were working with the Department of Justice because they found that we were not, as a state, identifying all the students. So there is a new protocol and procedure. So I do agree with you that that's something that we have taken a look at. And we do have something new that is called the Multilingual Learner Blueprint for Success, which also takes into account identifying the students. So that's one of the categories that we're being very specific about identifying them. Because you're 100% correct, we were not capturing all the students.
Yeah, and so I think one of the things that I'm thinking about is, if today in statute, right, under the funding formula law, that student success factor money automatically goes if you're identified as a free and reduced lunch. That's the way it's worded in law today. And so I believe that's true. Correct me if it's not, please. But so what the thought process would be is tie the identification not just to that free and reduced categorical, but to the other ways in which we identify ELL students to make sure that 40% got to those students.
Yes, we're in agreement with that because sometimes they're not the same. You can be a multilingual learner and not be free and reduced lunches. So we do miss
Right.
kids. Yeah, absolutely. We're in agreement.
Okay.
We have new protocols for that.
Okay, great. One of the other things that I wanted to talk a little bit about was around your FTE. So and I know I've talked to all of you about this over time, and I want to make sure that the legislature made a big commitment last year, particularly around really working with you to put in new accountability standards, new curriculum standards. I know there was concerns from a staffing perspective before all this happened. I know you've had to reorganize and reshift. Could you maybe, I think it's important, Commissioner, I know you and I personally talked about this a little bit, but could you maybe give a sense to the committee as to how much reshuffling and reorganizing and how much people's jobs within RIDE have changed? And then also, what do you view as the FTE requirement going forward to implement those legislative priorities that we passed around curriculum and accountability, particularly, but also more broadly in your department?
Yeah, so I thank you for bringing that up, and you've been very supportive as we've been having those conversations. As I mentioned before, I've asked the department to shift from being just strictly compliance to being a support organization. And I'll give you a couple of examples of where that's happened. And right now, during this pandemic, we have asked districts to put a plan together, but we have a point of contact for every district, have helped develop those plans, and will continue to work with them. So we have been working very closely with districts in a very different manner than we have done before. It's not just about what have you done and what haven't you done, but let me help you get there. That's what we've been doing, and that's a big shift, and it's a bigger job, and we still have the compliance job. I think when I came last year, when I first presented, I think I was here maybe 2 weeks, and I was asked what are the changes we're going to make, and we talked about some of those changes, and it was making that shift, and I feel like we've accomplished that. But what has happened is that we have doubled and tripled the workload for people. And there's certain things that in the compliance area that we're not doing as well as we could have, because for us, the focus is really supporting the districts. We want to be successful. And I mentioned early on that, you know, with COVID-19, we're one of the states that everybody's looking to replicate what we've done. Even Massachusetts. So that shift has been really important for us, but we do need the staff to continue to do the work. That has been very hard for us as we take on a new endeavor in the state. I want to bring to your attention, I think we sent copies, but this is everything that we have accomplished in the last year. It's more than Ryan has ever accomplished. And I think it's really important because we have done that in terms of making the shift. But I have to tell you, it's been really hard. If we had the staff that we need, we can do twice as much and do it in a way that has lasting change. So we have asked for these 9 positions, and it may seem like a lot, but part of what we've been doing is we've been outsourcing a lot of things and not having people come in and do the work here, where they can do multiple things. Because anyone that's working here, this is not a 9-to-5 job anymore. That does not exist. And I need staff that can continue to work that way. I don't know if there's anything specific that you want me to.
No, so I think that likely is important, and I know the 9 FTE that are there, I believe, if my memory is right, some of those, or a good amount of those, were dedicated specifically to the accountability and curriculum work that we wanted to continue. I just wanted to make sure that was clear to our members.
Yes, so, yeah, let me, thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
So we have, those positions are for we have a new accountability office. And that office is meant to support the districts and schools that are struggling throughout the state. We have never had that before. We have had 1 or 2 people, but this is an office that all they're going to do is really help move the schools along. And we are creating an accountability system for our entire state that does not exist, that is different, that will help districts actually move along the continuum. Not just identifying them, but how do they get better?
And I just think, and I apologize for making sure I make the finer point, I just wanted to make sure that we last year asked you to do some work, and you're now asking us for the resources to get that work done. And I just want to make that cycle clear as to the request that we have is the request we made of ourselves, essentially, as you're looking to get that work complete. You know, I'm not going to kind of tick through the whole list of the task force recommendations, but I would ask if you could just take as a follow-up to, you know, I had to go back and reread them myself today to sort of remind myself of kind of what everything that we had recommended was. But, you know, again, as I mentioned, when we pull this thing together, I really want to try as much as I can to insert those recommendations into whatever final product we end up as much as we can. And so if I could just ask you as a follow-up to take, you know, another read through that, and if there was any additional feedback, or if, I know we worked together a lot on that early in the year, but if something's changed post-COVID and doesn't really make that much sense anymore, I just ask if you'd share that back with the committee so that way we can balance those as we work together on that.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I would just be remiss if I didn't thank the Commissioner and her team for their work throughout this. And Commissioner, I heard your comment earlier around Massachusetts is asking us. When we started this, you know, a conversation about 2 years ago around reforming it, was we want to be more like Massachusetts, and already I think we're doing great work in having Massachusetts want to become emblematic of us. And so I just think that is fantastic work in a short order, and I want to thank you guys and encourage you to please continue on doing the work that you are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Senator. I know some other senators have questions, but just one quick question. You all look pretty cool, calm, and collected. Is it air conditioned in that room that you're in?
It is air conditioned.
Because it's about 110 in here, just to let you know. So with that, Senator De Palma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Tom Mulaney. Should I do that after I do the commissioner? Okay, that's good. Why both? We'll go Tom first, I guess, and then we'll go back to. No, I didn't want to. We'll do it all at the same. Tom, the basic question for you regarding the Ryback increase in percentage. Can we ensure that we'll never scoop money from Ryback?
I'm sorry, say that again, Senator?
So we're looking to increase, multiply by, go to 0.1% for the Ryback.
Correct. To fund the school building authority, yes.
Correct, to fund the SBA. How do we ensure, should we have language in there that says we'll never scoop any additional money that they have?
Well, that's the prerogative of the legislature if you'd want to do that, but
Okay.
this particular funding would be segregated within Ryback's budget to specifically be for the school building authority. So it would be already earmarked for, or set aside for a specific purpose.
I appreciate that.
Just part of their general resources.
Okay, so we can, if deemed appropriate, put some language in there that says this will not be scooped like all I can see is this increase that the cities and towns are going to pay for this. And at the end of the day, there'll be some excess money there we'll do something else with. That's all.
Understood, yes.
Thank you. If we can go back to the commissioner.
By the way, Senator, great point. Thank you for
You're welcome.
making that.
Sorry to switch back and forth.
We're here.
Okay.
Okay, we can't see you, but we can hear you, so let's proceed.
We're good. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner,
We can see you
Deputy,
now.
and Andy. Thank you for being here. As the chairman said, it looks awful cool there. It's awful warm here, but that's okay. We're still going to ask you the questions anyway, though. So as it relates to the pre-K and additional money you're looking for to match or to correspond with the federal money, when does the federal money run out, and what do we do at that point in time?
I think it's a 5-year grant, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. If we could just confirm that, I wrote that down, we'll confirm that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to the more follow-up on the pre-K and adding it to the funding formula, which the legislation looks to accomplish, to the LEAs. We have pre-K going on in places other than LEAs, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. From a funding formula perspective, though, where it's not going through the LEAs, they're not going to participate in the funding formula.
Yes,
If I'm reading that
Yes.
correctly.
yes, yes, yes.
So how do I balance the two for communities where they are paying, their pre-K is done through their traditional LEA programs, and other communities where it's not? And why would somebody, so we have parents paying and others are not paying, but they're going to pay, we're going to pay through taxes, and some communities benefit and some won't.
Well, I think that might be an answer for Director Hawkins, if you could chime in. But I think that what we're saying is that in the places that would need the seats, we are asking for those additional seats. That's what the money that we're requesting is for.
No, and I appreciate that, but we've set up a program for early childhood that, and we encourage the ability to fill those seats how best we can. But yet, funding moving forward, we're addressing only one. We need to look at it, I think, more holistically, the solution of funding, because we're addressing one side of the funding equation. We want all those seats, but yet the other part of the other variables in the equation that are not part of an LEA are not being supported. I'm not certain they should or they shouldn't, but I think we need something to say, how do we handle all of that? And I might be missing something somewhere, but so I'd ask the question is, we need a solution that's comprehensive for publicly funded pre-K and other ones that we're publicly funded because we're funding those via state dollars, but as they go forward and end, I'm not certain what we're doing. That makes sense?
Senator, this is Courtney. If I could just jump in, the purpose of adding it to the funding formula is not, I think, contemplated to be comprehensive, but the idea is that some districts that are moving towards universal pre-K have actually asked for their funding to come through the funding formula instead of this separate pot of money as it's currently funded. So you're right, we are always going to have multiple funding streams to get to a universal pre-K for those who choose pre-K. But we've had several districts who are getting to that point, say to those of us working on pre-K, can we look at funding it through the funding formula going forward instead of through this separate process that we've used to date?
Okay, Director, thank you. But I think, I understand and appreciate what you're saying. I think we need to look at it in totality to ensure that when the pre-K program, early childhood education, is critical. It's the foundation, and everybody concurs with that. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But I think from a funding perspective, as we look at the funding models or sources, it also should be coalesced together to then figure out how it's going out, where it's going to, and I know that we have priorities of where we want to address things first, but I think we need to look at it holistically and say, where is this money going? Who is it reaching? How do we ensure it's reaching the right students across all the locales of the various cities and towns that we all represent and the legislature all represents? Does that make sense? Or?
Yeah, that is the intention. And what we're seeking to do here is to give ourselves the opportunity to use the funding formula where it's appropriate in that kind of menu of options that we would use to fund pre-K going forward, because we are committed to this mixed delivery model where some amount of pre-K will always occur outside of districts. It will always be that there will be different paths to how we get to the universal target for pre-K.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll follow back on that. And Commissioner, the last question I have for you and the team, and we've talked about this before as it relates to English language learners or multi-language learners or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, and I understand as part of the commission that Senator Pearson led, understand and appreciate it being part of the success factor. But we've been doing this now for 4 years, 3 years? Yeah, L dollars. Probably 3 or 4 years. From the folks that I've talked to, and this has always been, sometimes I've been corrected because I've said the wrong number of years, that students should, respectfully, I'll use the word graduate out of English language learning in 3 years, roughly. The value of having it as a categorical allows us to see, and we want this to go to $7.5 million or whatever, allows us to see that there's return on the investment. I don't know that there is. I know we're going to spend, if we move forward with this, $7.5 million more than we did N number of years ago when we first started this, and it's been creeping up. I believe the results are there. Haven't seen the results, so how do we know what programs are working, which ones aren't? Students have actually, they were in the program for 3 years, they're not there anymore, or does RIDE...
No, let me talk through it. It's not that they're only there for 3 years. They ideally would test out in 3 years, but our kids are not testing out in 3 years. In the rest of the nation, multilingual learners, once they test out of that category, usually do better than all the other kids. In Rhode Island, it is not the case. Our kids do worse. So we have not invested enough in this population. We know that all the districts feel like they don't have the support with the teachers. Many of our kids go without the services because there isn't enough money for the support. So we have not seen the return on the investments because we haven't put in the amount that we really need to serve this population. So that is extremely important for us. Other states do see progress. We have not. Our kids are at single digits, and they stay there. So we need to make sure that we start following the other trends that are national, where our kids test out. Ideally, it would be in 3 years, but that's not what happens here. And that they do better or the same as the other kids. Right now, that's not what our data shows.
Okay, just to follow up. So, Commissioner, do we have that data for all the students that's de-identified, for all the students in English language that can be shared on how we're doing and where we're doing? Okay.
So for the first time in RIDE's history, we actually presented that data this year. So that was part of our data presentation. Yes, we can send you that information. Absolutely.
Okay, because I guess the question becomes, we're spending the $7.5 million. Maybe I should know this answer and I don't know the answer. How much should we be spending? If you were given all that was needed for English language learners across the state of Rhode Island for education, what is that total dollar amount?
Well, I can tell you that it's more than what we're requesting.
Well,
I think we were very conservative and supporting the districts. But ideally, we can get a number for you of what it would be like for what we would ideally need for all the students. We're making the request to continue to move in that direction, but we can get you that number.
okay, I guess I'd like to, I'll hold reserve judgment with regards to, we're making the investment, we're not getting the return we need. So either we're not applying it correctly, or there's not enough being applied to make a difference. So I don't think it's anywhere in the middle. It's one of those two things. So at the end of the day,
Yeah, so to answer that question, it's both, right? We're not making the investment and we're not applying. So we have to support districts and teachers to get this work done. That's why we convened a team statewide to really look at what are the things that we need to do to support and have success with this population. We are getting ready to launch that blueprint, what it looks like, what are the pieces that will be there at the district level, at the school level, at the classroom level. So we are doing that work. So it's both. It's both.
okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
We'll send you a draft of the blueprint as soon as it is completed. And our hope is that maybe some of you would want to join that committee moving forward to continue to push on this work, because I really do think that we can drive this and make change.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other committee member at this time? Senator Pearson.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, I'm only interrupting because I'm trying to tackle the point that Senator Palmer was just making there. So, item number 13 of our task force report. There is no basic education standard of additional supports needed for ELL students that is mapped to UCOA or NCES data to confirm whether the student success factor funding is sufficient for this population. Recommendation 13, RIDE shall create a BEP standard for ELL students and map expense data, UCOA or NCES, to an ELL standard to determine the appropriate ELL weight to add to the formula by October 1, 2020. So we were totally on that bandwagon, and I think those are the kinds of things that that's the kind of example of something that I think from the task force report that doesn't cost money now, but is good prep work for us to be doing later, that I think you're hitting on exactly that point, that I think it bodes all of us well to make sure that's inserted in whatever final budget language we do around this, because I think you're 100% right. Continuing to put money on it without stepping back and saying, what's the totality of the cost problem we're trying to solve? We're blindly throwing money, and I 100% agree with you, Senator. So I just want to make that point. Apologies for interrupting.
Thank you. And not to pile on, but to your point, that was one of the, what I'll say is a nugget from that task force work. We all had that suspicion going into that task force work that was the case, that we didn't have the ability to properly measure, and we didn't have an understanding of what was going on the ground level. With the money that we were allocating there. And as much as we wanted to allocate those funds because we knew the problem was there, we never understood the scope of the problem. We never understood what should be implemented to address the problem, really, the supports that were needed. We knew we were hearing from educators that they needed those supports. And so that sort of reinforces the point that Senator Palmer made, and that we came out of the task force with. And Commissioner, I'm sorry, go right ahead, Commissioner.
So I want to support what you're saying, because I think these dollars that we're asking for, we would have some control on how they're used, right? They have to be research-based. They have to be proven to have success with this population. It's not just the money going out to the districts. They have to put a plan together, and what they're selecting, we will approve. So it's not just blanket dollars. It's really a targeted budget, categorical fund for these students. And if it's something that has not had success anywhere and there's no research behind it, we don't want districts using it.
Right. So thank you, Commissioner. And this is an example of one of the comments I wanted to make during the course of this hearing in light of all of the funding priorities that you're asking this Finance Committee to support. Since you've come here, our ability to have a conversation with you and to get the sense that we've become a partner of yours and your team in addressing these priorities, despite the incredible challenges that the COVID pandemic has presented to you in education. Through all of that, you continued to communicate with the committee, with our other colleagues. Many of the concerns that we were getting from parents and from educators, when we brought them to your team, they were responsive. It's been a great confidence builder. It's been a trust builder. And so I wanted to say, certainly, at least from my perspective, and I think that the many committee members and many of my colleagues in the Senate share that, that we feel we're in a conversation with a partner. We feel that we can talk to you about the goals and priorities that we have, and you listen. Just recently, I was involved in a conversation with a number of educators and parents in my own district about the challenges that reopening is presenting. And one of the things that I felt very confident in saying to them, that you and your team are listeners, that you understand that part of a conversation that requires listening as well. So this topic is one of those. Since Senator Pearson's work with the task force, clearly you and your team have shown not only a willingness, but the ability to respond to it, and so we appreciate that. And start to get a feeling for a change, respectfully, that the money we're allocating to those priorities that you're defining for us will be money well spent, and will be informed as it happens. We won't have to keep chasing for it. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Any other senators? Well, Commissioner, thank you very much. Enjoy your air conditioning. It looks good in there.
Thank you, and thank you for the partnership. We're going to do this together. Thank you all.
Okay, we'll continue our discussion with Courtney, while I'm sure she's in air conditioning as well. We remain in 110 degrees. So the next topic are our Early Childhood Capital Fund and Wavemaker, and the Director of Human Services, Courtney Hawkins, is here with us to talk to us about it. So Courtney, welcome to Senate Finance.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be brief so as not to lose you all to heat exhaustion. I am just going to cover the Early Childhood Care Capital Fund, and just wanted to share a few words about it. So as Tom Mulaney mentioned, Article 10 creates the fund. It doesn't necessarily provide funding for it, but it creates the structure that we will use to hopefully launch this fund. Those of you who know me know that you are used to hearing me talk about the importance of our child care system. I wanted to take a minute to just acknowledge that COVID-19 has further demonstrated the critical nature of the state's child care system, not only in the care and development of our children, but also as a necessary component of our economy. As you all likely know, with the governor's support, DHS has carefully reopened child care across the state to almost full capacity. And I'm really proud that we have a number of summer camps operating, serving kids this summer, which is also going really well. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank my team and also the providers across the state that have worked in these unprecedented times to make that happen. So as Tom mentioned, the Article 10 will create this fund for us, which really sets up the state to start to make long-term investments in facilities for early childhood care. As some of you know, in 2019, DHS conducted an early learning facility needs assessment, which indicated that more than half of our buildings used for classrooms are in poor condition. It found that there's a shortage of available space for providers to expand, and that providers just don't have enough revenue for them to invest in their facilities, even if they had the ability to create the plans and roll out these improvements. We also know that there are early care deserts across our state, especially in the area of infant care, and that we need to think about how to replicate quality providers if we're going to have a fully robust and strong early care system. So this fund will get us started to do that. The administration of the fund will be managed by DHS, but we would do that through an intermediary that has experience with this type of work. And we've modeled the creation of the fund after Massachusetts' similar endeavor, which has been highly successful for that state. As Tom mentioned, this year we are hoping that the governor's proposed affordable housing bond will be successful and will go on the ballot for a voter approval this year. That bond includes the first investment into this fund, which is a $15 million investment. That would include $2 million for small grants to providers that would make urgent health and safety improvements, which I can tell you are really critical for us right now. It would include $12 million to construct completely new quality spaces. We estimate that would take care of about a dozen projects that would serve as many as 1,500 kids. And $1 million for technical assistance and support so that the early care and education field is prepared to take on these investments and implement them well. So just in closing today, I would say to you that I was passionate about this before COVID-19. I couldn't be more passionate now because we see not only how important our early care and education field is, but also how fragile it is. And it's clear that as a state moving forward, we need to make these kinds of investments. And I think this is, frankly, a smart way to get us started. And thank you in advance for your support.
Thank you, Director. Just a comment before I open it up to questions from other senators. This is not the hearing on the bond, and so I'll save the questions I have regarding that for later. But I'll suggest to you now that I wonder whether or not that bond is sufficient for the needs that we have, and I know this isn't that hearing, but when we do get there, I'd be interested in maybe prior to the hearing getting a little more information to get some assurance that the bond is, for all the reasons, frankly, that you identified just now, how great the need is. So, conversation for another day, but I thought I would just mention it given the topic that's on the agenda today.
I appreciate that, Senator, and I would just say that, part of the purpose of the creation of this fund is for us to make lots of different types of investments. So one thing we are seeing and will likely see into the future is that much of the stimulus or a fair amount of the stimulus and relief money that is coming into states relates to child care. So that would be an example of a different revenue source that we could use to invest in a fund like this. So while bonding is one option that I think we hope will be a reoccurring option for the state into the future, and we'll set a structure to do that, it's not the only potential funding source. And we want to do a really good job of setting this up so that there could be lots of different kinds of investments.
Thank you, Director. Good point. Questions from committee members? Senator Palmer.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Director. I know this is not the bond, but we're talking about the fund, correct? The fund is a part of this.
Sure.
So, Director, with regards to, if we think forward in creating the fund and it's going to get seeded with some money from somewhere, let's put the bond aside for a second. And I think the intention is to fund both public and private facilities. Is that correct?
That's right.
So one of the things I think we want to learn from, and it's been an experience and challenges as it relates to developmental disability community, as the LAD school was closed some 40 plus years ago, and we created group homes, which was the right thing to do at the time, and now we need to figure out what we do next. They had this, and they created this thing called the check swap that happens every year, It's an amazing thing that happens. It's only one of a kind.
I know what that is, but I'd rather not talk about it.
Correct, and we're not going to talk about it here because it's not part of this. We need to ensure we don't get into that check swap situation here. And because it's going to become the point where in some areas the state will be owning property. I'm not saying the state wants to own property necessarily. And in some areas, the state will have paid for property that are going to be run and operated by private providers. Right thing to do. But if we don't set up the mechanisms up front, that check swap situation will manifest itself, and potentially a check swap dance will be done every year for this because we don't know how to figure it out, and we didn't do it in the beginning, and everyone's going to say, let's do it next year. How do we, have you thought about that yet? Or how to address that?
Well, I'll say this, Senator. This fund does not intend to purchase, the state will not own facilities. This is all about renovation of facilities and investments to help people improve facilities. So it is not intended for the state to be the purchaser of the owner or the owner. I think we will have to be smart about how we ensure that the state's interests are protected where we're making large investments in renovations. And I, have already been working with the team at OMB and some of our legal partners, and I think Massachusetts has some good precedent for us to learn from to be able to do that. But I think one area that will be different is that these won't be state facilities. They will be renovated facilities that providers that are committed to the right quality of care and serving the kids that we need served most will have access to.
Appreciate that. I think it becomes the situation, should a provider choose or can't provide those services that they were providing, that this fund provided them to support for, we're spending the taxpayer dollars. How do we ensure those are being recovered at some point in time or something else is being done with it? But if that's not done up front, we all know what happens in the conversation when it gets to the end, and you're going to jump through all kinds of contortions to figure out what makes sense, and then sometimes people just throw up their hands and just say, we'll worry about it next year, and it never happens.
That's right. We'll be prepared with the specifics around that, Senator, and I'll look to my colleagues at OMB to help me with that. But we have contemplated those questions, and we'll bring you some strong legal argument for how we'll protect the state's interest in those situations. Some of these projects, I'll tell you, are small projects and relate to things like, we talk a lot about sinks and toilets.
Yep.
And then some do contemplate large-scale renovations of buildings, and we'll have to be sure that we have the right legal agreements in place and that we choose partners that have the right long-term fiscal sustainability, that we can reliably know that they'll be in service to the state for enough time.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
But we'll talk more about that for the bond, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions or comments from committee members? Director, thank you very much.
Thank you all. It's great to see you.
Thank you. So our next topic is Rhode Island Promise. So we're going to invite to present to the committee Megan Hughes, President at CCRI, and Alex Ogden, Associate Vice President at CCRI. Welcome to Senate Finance.
Thank you, Chairman Connolly. And just one modification, I will be delivering brief prepared remarks to you and your committee. It is not Alix who will be presenting, rather Vice President Enright, who with her team oversees the Rhode Island Promise program. So Sarah will be presenting the deck immediately after my remarks, at which point we both welcome your questions. So thank you to you and to the members of the committee. And on behalf of our college, our employees, and most of all, of course, our Promise students, we appreciate the opportunity to come before you to share the success of the Rhode Island Promise Scholarship Program, and as outlined in the governor's budget request, ask this committee to lift the sunset on the Promise program. Without action, this year's incoming class, so those students that completed the 12th grade in Rhode Island, will be the last group of high school graduates who are eligible for Promise. thereby eliminating college as an option for thousands of future high school graduates and their families. We know that the promise of free college tuition is a powerful message, one that resonates with high school students who never believed college was in their future. By making this promise permanent, it will allow current high school students, and we would suggest even middle school and elementary school students, to see a path to a college degree. With this degree or certificate, Rhode Islanders will make a better life for their future families, and Rhode Island employers will have a strong workforce. In April of this year, in accordance with the enabling legislation, the college provided the governor, Senate President, and Speaker of the House a report that we authored on the first two cohorts. For the first promise cohort, so that class that began in the fall of 2017, we have seen a 2-year graduation rate of 19%. And to contextualize that, this graduation rate is more than 4 times the college's historical 2-year graduation rate of 4%, and indicates our continued improvement. To contextualize it nationally, the national benchmark shows that we have moved from being nearly 60% below, so 57% below the national average at our 6% rate pre-promise, to 29% above the national average, which is currently 14%. So we've gone from 6 to 19, from being nearly 60% below what's happening with our peers around the country to nearly 30% above. The 3-year graduation rate, which we will finalize at the end of August, is expected to be 30%. With that anticipated rate of 30%, we will double our 15% 3-year graduation rate from a few years ago, which will position us as among the very highest in New England. For the second promise cohort, those who began in the fall of 2018, we again expect a projected 19% 2-year graduation rate from a historic rate of what I just shared, 4 to 6%. That is the group, some of whom are with us either completed in the spring or are still completing with us right now this summer. That kind of growth and improvement over a relatively short period of time in enrollment, retention, and completion is virtually unprecedented in community colleges. And so what do we know, and what are we asking? We know that the Promise Scholarship Program works, that it has provided our students with the opportunity to succeed. We believe that it is a very powerful, effective policy for our state and for our economy. And we want to thank the General Assembly and all of you for your vision to create the program. Before turning it over to Sarah, I simply want to thank the taxpayers of Rhode Island and the General Assembly for the first 3 years of its support of the Rhode Island Promise, and we are asking for your support to lift the sunset provision from the original legislation. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I'll turn it over to Vice President Enright, and after which we are happy to take your questions. Sarah does have a very short, I believe, slide deck that will put the numbers that I shared briefly with you in front of you for your review. So with that, Sarah, I will turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Megan. And thank you, members of this committee. It's hard to believe that just 3 years ago, you all were putting this into legislation. So thank you. And my goal tonight is to just share where we are at this point. So first off, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So there really, I think I don't need to remind this group why did this policy come to be in the first place, but really just so that we're all on the same page. This is about having a prepared workforce for the future. It's about looking at the jobs of today and tomorrow and realizing that we have a gap to close in terms of the level of education in our state writ large and where we need to be economically competitive. So the Rhode Island Promise performance, there are really 2 things I'm going to speak to right now. First is performance of the program over its first 3 years. And second, we'll be just outlining the governor's 3 proposed changes. To think about performance, we've framed it in the context of the 2 goals that were set forth in the legislation. The first goal is increase the number of students enrolling at CCRI. The second is increase the number of students completing degrees on time at our college. And I will say, before I get into any numbers, I believe that we have resoundingly delivered on both of those goals through this policy. And we are grateful for what it's done for our students and our college and our state in its first 3 years of existence. So to the first goal of increasing the number of students enrolling at CCRI, I know President Hughes spoke to quite a bit of data, so I will move swiftly through these, but I'm happy to take questions. If you look at the first bar here, you'll see the comparison cohort. Those are the students who, before the Rhode Island Promise program existed, came to our college as first-time full-time students straight out of high school. What you'll see is that with each year of the Promise program, there's been dramatic growth in enrollment of that population for a total of 136% growth, or more than doubling. The positive piece in this is that low-income student enrollment has actually grown faster than the cohort overall. So if all populations were growing at the same rate, each of these slides would say 136% increase. But in fact, we've seen that low-income Pell Grant funded students have been attracted to this program at an even faster rate of growth, which is important because when you think about who has historically lacked access to higher education in our state, who is struggling to get into our workforce and have the knowledge, skills, abilities, and credentials that they need, it's historically our low-income students and students of color who've been boxed out and who have really struggled with financial and other hurdles. So we feel very pleased that this policy has not only helped support overall enrollment growth, but has really helped students who need and deserve access to higher education to find their way to our college. So again, students of color attending first-time, full-time, straight out of high school has grown dramatically, 185% increase, which is an almost tripling. So I'm now going to move to legislative goal number 2. Those first few slides were really about, did we deliver on the enrollment goal? And the second question is, have we delivered on increasing the number of students completing degrees on time at our college? And I would say, again, yes. I think that we have moved from 4% historical, which really was there for several years. You know, if you look at years of CCRI's 2-year graduation rate, it bumped along 4%, 5%. We were happy to see it tick up to 6% last year. So to be at 19% is really a win for our college and a win for our state. And it means dramatically more young adults are coming into our college and walking out with a college credential 2 years later. So these are number of people, 75 people from the pre-promise cohort graduated within 2 years. When you combine enrollment growth and success rate growth, you have 307 people who achieved that same outcome out of the first promise class. Similar, seeing increasing results for low-income students and students of color. Low-income students historically had a 3% 2-year graduation rate at our college, 3%. So when you look at those actual numbers, they were very small. So we achieved a 15% 2-year graduation rate with the first Rhode Island Promise cohort for low-income students. Similar success with students of color. The truth of our history as an institution is that our 2-year graduation rate for students of color was historically, and that historical is a 5-year average, was 2%. So I can't claim to be proud of 13% as an absolute number. We have a long ways to go to close equity gaps in our state and within our college. But I will say that through this program, we're certainly moving in the right direction from 2% to 13%. So with that, that covers the overview of how this program has performed against its legislative goals to date. I want to quickly walk through the 3 proposed changes to the legislation, removing the sunset, including certificates, and allowing DCYF and College Crusade funds to be exempted from the algorithm for the calculation of the scholarship. First, this is, of course, what we feel most compelled as a college to advocate for. I think that this program has worked very well in its first 3 years. I think it has delivered for students. I think it has shown what young Rhode Islanders are capable of when they're given a shot. I think it's had an impact on families and certainly on our college and our state more broadly. So we strongly believe that this program should be made permanent. Second proposed legislative change is to include not only associate degrees as eligible for the Promise Scholarship, but also shorter term certificate programs. I think that's just pragmatic. Again, if the ultimate goal is to get our population to a level of education that connects with demand in the labor market, we do have some certificate programs that are in real demand, that are a year long or a year and a half long, and we have students who are interested in those. And right now they're not eligible for the Promise Scholarship. So it's our hope that this would just fit a particular niche for students who are interested, and will create supply within particular pockets of our labor market. And then this is a quite specific, and I would say on a dollars basis, small one, but important for the young people who are affected. Today, if a student earns a College Crusade scholarship, so say they work from 5th grade through high school to earn a $3,000 a year College Crusade scholarship, that becomes the first dollar in, and the state pays the remaining funds in the way that the legislation works today. This change would make it so that those students hang on to their College Crusade scholarship to utilize it for books, transportation, and other expenses. In actuality, this is a small dollar issue because the vast majority of Crusaders, and nearly at least last year, it was every single one of the DCYF students, are federally Pell funded. So they're not really receiving those state funds anyway. But that's a change. You know, you're talking about a handful of Crusaders, and for those young people who've worked since middle school for that scholarship, it can make a big difference. And with that, we just want to say thank you. I think that this program has been a state effort. I know it's taken our faculty and staff and students and their families, and certainly all of you and a whole lot of Rhode Islanders who have rallied around this program. And so we are grateful, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Vice President, thank you very much. President, thank you very much. Questions for either President Hughes or Vice President Enright? Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for continuing to provide us this information. You know, I know industry-wide, or I should say, you know, community college-wide, graduation rates are consistently something that are incredibly low, especially on two-year based programs. And so I think the work that we've done to go, you know, from 4 to 19% and from these other numbers, they're big leaps and gains in short periods of time. So do not take this at all, you know, as a criticism of those percentages, but could you maybe talk to us a bit more around how do we make, because that's going to be the point that anybody picks up and they look at this and they say, great, it's getting 19%, but, you know, can you give sort of your roadmap of where do you think you can get it, and what are the steps to get there, and how do we really become a national leader in these two-year graduation rates?
Sure, I'm happy to take that, and then I'm sure President Hughes has plenty that she'd like to layer on. First off, I'd say that this particular deck on program performance was targeted around the two-year graduation rate because that's what's most specifically called out in the legislation. I do think it's worth adding that we're going to hit a 30 or perhaps 31% three-year graduation rate. That number gets finalized at the end of this summer session, but we're tracking toward at least 30% on that figure. So we are moving toward a national leader in this space. I think, you know, you talk about 30%, then another 10 or 10+% that will have transferred, many more students coming back. So you're talking about nearly 60% of students still engaged and moving forward. And so then I think that begs two questions. How do you continue to engage the other 40%? And how do you make sure that those 60% are moving along at the fastest clip possible? And I think it's about a whole host of levers. I think that this policy in and of itself is a very strong start. I think that we as an institution have to continue providing support. I think that, you know, we just heard the commissioner speak about all the changes that are underway in K-12, and we feel greatly optimistic about that. I think, to be perfectly honest, we are well on our way to becoming national leaders. To your question of how far can we go, I ask myself that every day, and we're just going to keep going. I think that every student who walks through our doors does so because they want opportunity and they want to go after it. So it is our aspirational hope that we get to 100%. If you're asking me most realistically, I think we can for sure move the needle on the 60% and get closer to 70 something. And I think it's going to take continued, concerted, collective effort. And there are a lot of different levers that go into student success. It's advising, there's placement, there's all the work that our faculty are doing to reform initial math and English classes. There's making sure that each student has a purpose and a path and a sense that they're in college on a path to somewhere. So I don't think there's any one lever that I would highlight as the master lever in a sense, but I would say that I think we're working on the right set of collective priorities. We are moving in the right direction, and we are already being noticed, I think, as a national leader, thanks in large part to this program.
So thank you. And I guess one thing that would be helpful at some point for you to share with us would be some of that benchmarking versus other community college systems across the country. And I also think the other thing too, if you look at the cohort that enters, you know, and the legislation focuses on the 2-year because they have to be on the on-time graduation for 2 years for the promised payment to be made, right? So, but understanding of that cohort, you know, so of the 81% that is not completing in that 2-year, what's happening, right? Are 30% of them completing in 3? Are another 20% of them doing 1 year and transferring to a 4-year institution? Sort of waterfall that out, you know, for us a bit around where are these students going to give us a sense of what if it's not a 2-year graduation, then what is the other successful endpoint? And then trying to then say, okay, based on those endpoints, we believe we can get to here, because success may not be a 2-year graduation. Success may be a transfer to a 4-year institution before that. Success may be something different. So I just want to make sure that we provide the appropriate context around that and help us understand where are those students going, where do we look like versus other systems, and what's our end goal for not just this program, but really for CCRI and the objectives that you're sort of delivering. Absolutely.
I can follow up with a detailed report that highlights some more of that. I think the high points are 30 or 31% will graduate in 3 years. 10% have already transferred. I'd expect another 5% will still transfer pre-graduation. And then we're hanging on to another percentage. But I'll get you that official breakdown data-wise. I think to put it into context, in addition to comparing to the national averages that President Hughes highlighted, I reflect a lot on where we are with higher education as a nation. And if you look at the 4-year higher ed system, 58% of students pursuing a bachelor's degree graduate in 6 years. So 58% of students at all bachelor's degree institutions, from every one of our state entities up to Harvard, Brown, and the most selective institutions, and 58% of those students get a bachelor's degree in 6 years. So with that in mind, in terms of where can this go and where do we want to go as a college, we want to keep pushing. And I think as a nation, we need to keep working the pre-K through 20 system together. And as a state, if I reflect on what I've heard tonight, I feel optimistic, and I feel like we're going to keep pushing each year. And I hear you on the question on the ceiling and what are our goals and where are we going to go, and we can come back to you with a more concrete numerical answer on that as well.
Yeah, I think that would be incredibly helpful if you could share that with us, and I think it's something we should, you know, publish on some of our materials so that it's out there, just because I want to make sure that we provide the full context of sort of the program and what's going on. But thank you so much for your efforts here. So 2 things. I think the program's great, but I think every time you're before us, you've got a good passion for this program. So thank you so much, and please keep pushing it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all for your support.
Senator Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I wanted to address the proposed change for the certificate, and I think that's a great proposed change. I think it makes a lot of sense where students would be able to basically get these certificates in markets that are high demand in a shorter period of time. But my question would be, if that student was to receive the certificate, would they also be eligible to receive an associate's degree, or is that just a completely different pathway?
So, Sarah, I'll jump in and you round it out. It's a terrific question, and thank you. Our focus over the last several years has really been to make sure that our certificates can scaffold into an associate degree. So the intention of our certificate work absolutely would be to create opportunity for Rhode Islanders who need that certificate and go directly into the workforce. And if they're interested then and are able, certainly if they are able to continue as full-time enrolled students and hit the bottom bar for the Promise Scholarship, they would be eligible for that second year of funding. If they need to go out into the workforce right away, we certainly would welcome them back in order to complete that degree.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Other questions for the President or Vice President? So I have a couple. President, Vice President, thank you for being here. If we can go back to a follow-up question that Senator Pearson asked. We're going to move to, assume the number is 31%, we're going to move to 29% above the national average. If we were to say who's the best in the country, who is that? Who's number one on graduation rate?
Yeah, I can't tell you who number one is. We need to ask our institutional effectiveness team. I can give you some folks to follow. Valencia in Florida is certainly someone to follow, but we'll come back to you on who's the best.
Okay, thank you. So if we think back to the numbers that we're looking at, 19% in 15 and 13, if you, and I assume you've looked at this, if you looked at the rest of the college and the graduation rate for those in non-promise, what are those numbers, approximately?
Yeah. Sarah, do you have those in front of you?
It's a good question. The way that community college graduation rates are most traditionally measured is looking at first-time, full-time students. Mm-hmm. And over the past few years, our first-time, full-time student cohort has had extreme overlap with our promise student cohort. So those numbers are nearly identical. That population is doing slightly less well, but still very much outperforming the past. So for example, our first promise cohort had a 19% two-year graduation rate. The overall cohort had an 18% two-year graduation rate. So I think, and we're seeing similar numbers on our projected 3-year, which we'll have in about a month's time. I think the message in that is that every student success lever that we have had to pull to deliver results within Rhode Island Promise has had a ripple effect across the college. There isn't any one lever that even exists simply to serve Rhode Island Promise students. So whether we're looking at placement, whether we're looking at better developmental coursework or creation of guided pathways and more direction on careers, we're seeing improvement across the college. In fact, I just spent the morning looking at the number of students, the number of degrees and certificates that we will award this year. And it looks like we will beat last year and therefore once again award more degrees and certificates than any year in the college's last 20 plus years of tracked data. And so I think that there's not a great way that any college calculates graduation rates for transfer students or part-time students, although we're working on that. But what I will say is, I think as evidenced by our total number of graduates, the changes that Promise has brought to the institution or helped us to catalyze are having an effect far more broadly than just that population that's helped.
Okay. I was going to say, following up from I'll say it was a conference, Complete College America in 2016, the day after Election Day, in fact, or 2 days after Election Day. And it was a one-day conference in California. So it was quite the whirlwind, but I believe the college went through what I recall were 4 things. One was these are my words, a structured pathway for students. So these are the courses you take in that particular program. Number 2, some kind of block scheduling, because they're potentially students that also work, single parents, children, all those kinds of things. The third thing I think was co-courses, both courses for credit and courses not for credit at the same time. And I believe the fourth one was the appropriate math course to take and not needing to be algebra, but I think the conversation at the point in time was clearly not calculus, but something like a data analytics course. So I remember we had the hearing for Rhode Island Promise some 4 years ago. It was going to be transformative for the college because you weren't going to do this just for Promise students. If you did, I don't know how you do that, just for them. And the rest of them are going to take some other kinds of courses. You can have 2 different schedules, but it was going to transcend and transform the entire college. So President or Vice President, has that been the case? And what else needs to happen in the next step?
So thank you for the question, Senator. And I'd like to take less than a minute to go back to where Senator Pearson began us. And I won't repeat what Sarah said. I certainly would affirm it. And the 2 points that she at least referenced that I would come back to, and then I want to speak directly to the 4 points you denoted. There were 2 reasons, I think, for realistic optimism that we will continue to see our graduation rates continue to climb. The first is precisely what Sarah noted, which is the energy, the reform, the focus, and the leadership happening in the K through 12 space. As you all know, those students become our students. So we feel like there is tremendous opportunity to build an even tighter, more productive partnership, and we are so encouraged by what we're seeing in that space. So that's the first. The second is all of the work that has been brought into the college, let's say over the last nearly 5 years, has served all of our students. And as many of you know, in the education space, 5 years can be the blink of an eye. So I think so much of the work that has come into the college is really at its early stage. You know, the shoots of grass are just coming up through the soil. So I am genuinely optimistic that the combination of what we're seeing happening statewide with K-12 and then the ongoing maturing of this early stage work that has been launched should give us reason for optimism. With respect to the CCA principles, you named 4, so I'll paraphrase, but guided pathways. So all students have a path of study. You talked about co-requisite. Take your developmental education courses concurrently with your credit-bearing gateway courses. You talked about block scheduling, and this is a real paraphrase, the right math placement. I would say 3 of those 4 are now in place at CCRI. So we received our first ever Title III grant to design and implement guided pathways. That is an example, I think, of one of those shoots of grass that is beginning to come through the soil, but it is there and is, I think, something that our faculty should take enormous pride in creating, designing, and now as we are animating. In terms of the co-requisite, that is absolutely something that we are doing in both our math and our English departments. Those numbers continue to grow. We look forward to the day where the students arrive at the college, many fewer of them requiring college readiness. And for now, the co-requisite approach has yielded positive results for those students. The right math, we've rolled out 3 new math pathways. I think we are encouraged by those pathways. And I guess I would want to acknowledge, just like every other community college team that I connect with around the country, we continue to have real work to do with educating our students in math. So need for ongoing improvement there. The 4th, block scheduling, we have not arrived at block scheduling yet. We have made meaningful improvements in rolling out a master schedule, so a predictable schedule. We did not have one of those 5 years ago. We do not yet have block scheduling. We understand it's where we should be headed, and we look forward to making that kind of growth and improvement.
Thank you, President. Thank you very much. I have a follow-up, but I know Senator Felag has a question. Senator Felag.
Do you hear me? All right. Basically, I congratulate you on the success of your program. Every year we seem to have a steady increase, and it's offering more students an opportunity to begin their pathway towards either a college degree or a college certificate or some sort of program that enables them to get a better paying job. Usually this hearing takes place in May, but this year, obviously, because of the circumstances, it's now in the end of July. And I guess my question would be more towards, do we have more realistic numbers? I saw your charts, but I think the charts ended in the fall of 2019. what sort of projections do you have for this fall semester coming up? Are there increasing enrollments, or where do we stand as far as that's concerned?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Enrollment also reports into Sarah, so I'll make very brief comments. We are significantly behind with our enrollment for this fall, so fall 2020. If we look at enrollment numbers even today against where we were same day last year, we are down nearly 30%. So I will let Sarah speak in more detail to kind of where we're working to go. I would want this committee to know that while I think we are both and Sarah's team have some optimism that we will reduce that number, I do not believe we will be where we were this fall. Excuse me. I do believe we will see an enrollment decline this fall.
It's a good question. I don't have too much more to add than that, other than to just benchmark our goal or expectation pre-pandemic had been that we didn't expect to see additional growth within the Promise program. So we expected another cohort of roughly 2,600 students. But right now, as President Hughes shared, we are tracking 27% behind same day last year as of today. So we are doing everything we can to make up that gap. I think there are really 3 factors that go into it. One is we started registration late. So we have a little bit of a time lag that we are working to make up. And that was caused by the pandemic. 2 is you have a lot of students who are struggling to make up their minds amid just the broad uncertainty of the pandemic. And 3 is I think you do have a lot of students, just a lot of Rhode Islanders who are struggling to meet basic needs right now. And so if you're worried about putting food on the table, and if multiple members of your family have just lost their jobs, and if your life is in some degree of upheaval, as much as we text you every day and say, Megan, it's time to register for fall classes, we do know that that is a factor as well. So all of those factors considered, I fully recognize it's my responsibility to get up every day and get after it. And it's my hope that we will, over the next 6 weeks, close quite a bit of that gap, but that gap is real.
Yeah, because basically I was going to ask you what were the factors involved in, I would think one of the major factors probably would be because of the students learning from home rather than have their guidance counselors pushing them on a daily basis to say, are you going to college? And obviously those that are self-motivated have already put in their applications and are just waiting the final approval and deciding what college they wanted to go to. Whereas those that are undecided on college need that extra push in March and April to say, well, here's an alternative for you that will provide you a better education and allow you to move forward. And without that guidance counselor there throughout that spring semester, I think that's part of the reason why you probably lost a lot of students. Other than that, I congratulate you on the job you're doing, and obviously keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cano.
Thank you, Chairman. So I joined the meeting a little late because I had another commitment, but I was able to listen to a little bit of the conversation. And most important, I think that I'm super familiar with the program and the success of the program. For full transparency, I follow, and I'm a member of the Charitable Foundation. So I'm a proud alumni of CCRI. I want to say, I make a couple comments. I want to say congratulations on the success and on the efforts that you really do to reach to the levels that the students need for support and to make sure that even during this pandemic, they have the necessary resources. I have seen firsthand what you do in the Charitable Foundation, and I just wanted to make sure that you hear from me how proud I feel to have CCRI in Rhode Island, and the leadership of both of you is really exemplary. So with that, I also like to say that being a senator from Pawtucket and knowing the need of the communities of color around the state, a program such as this is really important to change the course of life, the success of a student. So I do believe that there is a lot of work to do still in terms of making sure that there is more awareness and people continue to enroll. But I'm here to help because I do believe that this program really makes a difference, and I want to thank you. My only question that I do have is kind of with going off what Senator Felag was saying, is about the challenges that you've seen in this last semester with distant learning, and if you saw that there was a lack of productivity or performance in the students, and I'm specifically kind of concentrating on the communities of color, because I do know that there is a barrier when it comes to access to internet technology and all of that. So is there a correlation that you've seen due to the pandemic in the last semester with lack of resources and maybe performance when you see with the students? You have.
Thank you, Senator. I'll begin, and then I'm sure Sarah can follow up. I'll start with, let's get back to you with detailed data on, and just disaggregating the data according to race and ethnicity, so we can, to the degree we can do that, we will send it along to you and to the committee. I want to just take a step back and observe a couple of things. So I talk to students in this new world we occupy regularly, as I'm sure you also do, and members of the committee. And look, there will be outliers, and I've spoken to those outliers who say some version of going to college entirely online is a piece of cake, it's no problem, I've got this. That is, of course, not what the majority of community college students are saying, either at CCRI or at any community college. It is a struggle for all the reasons you have highlighted. I think I am struck ultimately by the following. What we did not see in the spring was catastrophic failure. I will tell you that in early April, that would have been one of my predictions based on what we were seeing and the very real barriers to learning that our students were facing day after day. But you know this as well as I do, our students are incredibly resourceful and they just figured it out. As you know, as a member of the foundation, we were able to very, very quickly provide 900 students with the technology grants that they required to get to class right away. So that funded them for many of the things you just iterated. So online, wireless access at their homes, some kind of device, a Chromebook or a laptop if they didn't have one, et cetera. So we were able to respond in the minute. When I look forward to the fall, I think what is chief among our challenges is to really help more than anything the students that just completed the 12th grade, along with our returning students, really understand that our faculty are waiting for class to open and to welcome them back. And though we're still in the middle of this virus, our faculty have been preparing all summer long to truly deliver the strongest possible online learning experience, and they want our students in those classrooms. So I do think if we are able to really get that message out in an effective way, we'll accomplish two things. Number one, we'll see that enrollment decline shrink, and even more importantly, we will see those students having the opportunity. But I think anyone who claims that attending college in this format full-time is ideal is not being fully honest. I think it's a real challenge. I think things are lost. And I think when it is safe to do so, our faculty and our staff very much want to be back in the classroom.
Well, I want to say thank you to both of you for your leadership and your answer. And I look forward for whatever set of data that you do have to like really review that, just to see how we can be also helpful in targeting, the students that need. So thank you so much for your leadership, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions for the President or Vice President? So, President, one last comment, not necessarily a question. Each year, I did not look at it this year, but each year I look at the incoming students who need, I think you said we're not college ready, or I'll say need to take remedial courses, either 1, 2, or 3. And the list is from all high schools across the state, public and private. If there's not more than 5, they don't identify the number, they don't identify the school, they just identify the school and leave it where it is. With regards to the need for students that are not college ready, that the 2/3 that need to take either 1, 2, or 3 remedial courses, has that changed this year? And if not, I think we need to address that. Otherwise, that will be a factor in potential achieving on time, if with on time is 2-year graduation. So your thoughts on that?
My immediate thoughts are, let's send you the data, and I don't believe we have seen, I would see no reason to anticipate exceptional progress with the symptoms that create those outcomes that you're describing have not gone away. So I don't have the exact numbers. We will get those to you, but I would anticipate they would be roughly what they were from last year.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Vice President. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think now we're going to move on to Amy Grabowski, Executive Director, Rhode Island Education and Industry Centers, the new article regarding the Woonsocket Education Center. So Amy, are you there?
I am here. Thank you.
We can't see you yet, but hang on a second. There you are. Okay.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today about the progress of a new higher education and workforce training center for Northern Rhode Island. I'm going to share my screen. As you can see from the slide, as I continue to explain to you, we have ended at a possible lease arrangement of $12.75 a square foot for the first year, for 10 years, for the 3rd floor of 95 to 117 Main Street, Woonsocket. So as introduced, my name is Amy Grabowski, and I am the Executive Director of the Wesley Education Center, a public-private partnership that has served 3,500 individuals in just 3.5 years. We provide outstanding courses that bear certifications, credentials, and credits that enable individuals to qualify for well-paying jobs. Often, we are also the agent to help them get those jobs. The education they receive at our facility is stackable, therefore the coursework is meaningful to them in the short term, as well as fulfilling their long-term post-secondary education needs. For Rhode Island businesses, the candidate pool is not only expanded, but it now contains individuals who are trained in the positions for which the employers are hiring. As we like to say in Rhode Island, this is not a train and pray model, where we educate individuals and pray that they get jobs. No, we work with the employers and organizations such as Skills for Rhode Island Future and our higher ed institutions such as CCRI to train and place students immediately after course conclusion in jobs that are in demand. And now we want to do the same for the Northern Rhode Island area and the state, where the need is even greater. The new center will be positioned to address unemployment in Central Falls, Pawtucket, and Woonsocket, which have the highest rates of unemployment and did prior to COVID. Currently, Northern Rhode Island's unemployment rate is approximately 20%, which compares to all of Rhode Island's rate of 12.4%. Evidence continues to point to the fact that communities with large minority constituents are disproportionately affected by coronavirus-related unemployment, thus an even more dire need for us collectively to build a bridge from Rhode Island businesses in Northern Rhode Island who need qualified workers to individuals living in the region who could, with training and education, be eligible for those jobs. According to the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training, the Governor's Workforce Board, the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, and key employers in the region, such as CVS, Fidelity, and AAA, the jobs with upward mobility and long-term traction are, and will continue to be, in IT, data security, healthcare, and those based in customer services. By increasing access to certification, this higher ed center will help transform the workforce from soon-to-be obsolete jobs to new, longer-term, and more lucrative career pathways. Our first courses will be in cybersecurity, IT, pharmacy technician, English as a second language, and at the request of CVS, job training for individuals with developmental disabilities who will work at CVS. This project is supported by the business community in the region, as indicated by some of the letters of support that you've received from the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, Fidelity, CVS, and their committed employer partners to date. Together, they have contributed funding and pledged to support the center's efforts by proposing trainings and courses they need most, and then hiring our graduates. Like the Westerly Education Center, this business model is intended to be a self-supporting facility because of the involvement of the private businesses who benefit from the availability of a talent pool educated specific to the jobs they will perform at the companies. And in case you weren't aware, and forgive me for complimenting the hard work of my team, but the Westerly Education Center was in the black in the first 9 months of operation. My talented staff and I are ready to repeat that success in the northern region, thus reducing labor costs during the launch of the center and bringing our expertise in our relationships north. We are also continuing to fundraise. We have raised about $400,000 has been raised to support the site build out and customization, reducing overall initial costs and costs of construction for the Main Street lease. The $400,000 that has been donated will fund improvements to meet our unique needs. Our occupancy will bring revitalization to Main Street. How do we know that? Look at Westerly. In 3 years, we have spent over $170,000 at local businesses in support of our operations. Our presence and that of our students, instructors, and guests have been felt at small restaurants, office suppliers, coffee shops, and more. Similar to the Westerly model, the center will collaborate with the state's Institution of Higher Education for their expertise in curriculum design and delivery of the content to meet the education and training needs of employers in the region. The center will also provide opportunities for students to seek credit for prior education and work experience and receive skills assessment for optimal placement. As you may be aware, we issued an RFP for the site in January of 2020 and began lease negotiations after the State Properties Committee approved the finalist. The recent improvements to the site, as well as the improvements we have planned, make this site the most suitable for the Education Center. On behalf of the Office of Post-Secondary, our education partners, CCRI, Rhode Island College, our employer partners, CVS, Fidelity, AAA, and small businesses represented by the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, I ask for your support today for the center, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Amy, thank you very much. Questions for Amy? Senator Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. As you can probably imagine, I have a lot to say about this particular project representing Woonsocket, but just a little bit of background, and I'm not really sure that all of you can tell by the drawing, but this is the building that is referred to as the commercial block because it literally takes up the entire block. It's a historic building. It's got great potential, and unfortunately, it's been mostly vacant for a very, very long time, possibly decades. It's in the heart of Main Street, and although our anchors on either side, again, for those of you who are not familiar with Woonsocket, there are two squares, Market Square and Monument Square, that are rather built up and are getting more built up, and we've been lucky in the last 6 or 7 years under the current administration that have been able to just attract businesses with the hard work of the planning department and others. But the middle always remained mostly vacant. And so this is an exciting prospect for Woonsocket and for Main Street and the potential for 500 new students that can make a huge difference to not only the existing businesses who have been really struggling, particularly during COVID, but also, again, to draw on those secondary businesses and can be an economic catalyst, which increases the tax base. But mostly, it's about the job training and the job placement, which is really, really crucial during this time, particularly for Woonsocket, with its high unemployment rate and just being one of the communities that's been really hit hard by COVID. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for all of your hard work, and also to thank the governor and the mayor and both administrations for really working to make this come to fruition. I believe it was 2 years ago this month that the governor came to Woonsocket and announced that this was going to be happening, and I was really excited about it then. I know a lot of different locations were looked at, but I think this is not just beneficial to Woonsocket, but also all of northern Rhode Island, being on that bus line, and really important getting those folks not just from the immediate area, but also the surrounding area into the city. So I just want to thank you for your hard work and your diligence, and I think it's very comforting and reassuring to know that there's actual proven measure of success in Westerly, and I've seen what that has brought to the city. So more comments than questions, but I will certainly give the mic over to my colleagues if they have any questions about this.
Senator, thank you very much. Other questions for Amy? Amy, I have one. You indicated on your first chart the private investment of $400,000. Can you say who is providing that private investment?
Oh, I can submit that separately. I don't have all of it in front of me.
Okay. That's
One of the
fine.
donations was from AAA. So collaboratively, it was a total of 400,000, but I can absolutely send that in.
Thank you. One last question I have, then just a comment. You identified several areas. Obviously, the first one I'm most excited about, the cybersecurity one. Obviously, and I think it was identified yesterday, the first P-Tech graduate in the state, or graduates in the state, or the P-Tech program out of Newport County Community, or Newport County Regional Technical Center, Career Technical Center, excuse me, the CTC. It's great that you have. How did you choose these areas? Looks like pharmacy is obviously the right one, given that you have CVS there. But you chose cybersecurity and process technology. I assume that's from CVS as well?
So process technology is what we currently offer at the Wesley Education Center, and we're hoping that we can bring that north. That is for the pharmaceutical industry, brewing, textile manufacturing, and cancer research, and it has been very successful in Westerly. And if we do replicate it up in Northern Rhode Island, we will most likely partner with either Davies Technical Center or Woonsocket to utilize their science labs and have that collaboration so that we don't necessarily have to build out an outfit to additional science labs because of the cost for that. The cybersecurity and IT, we continue to have constant conversations with the anchor employers and other employers in the region about what their needs are. And while what I'm proposing to you today is what I anticipate we'll offer 10 months from now when the building is operational, we will continue to have those evolving conversations, because what we have found works in Westerly is we're not going to offer a program unless we're confident that we're going to be able to find jobs for people on the other end. And so at the moment, that's what the employers are telling us. If that seems to shift, then we will also shift with our higher ed partners and our employers.
One other question and one last comment. The students you're going to receive, the students that are going to come to the center, are coming from where and with what capability or capacity or background from an education perspective?
It depends on the program. And again, I can tell you from my experience in Westerly, many of our programs are Real Jobs Rhode Island programs, or they're very specifically employer driven. For example, as you know, we train electric boat employees, and that particular program, the electric boat hires the individuals first and sends them to us for training. But process technology, on the other hand, is a pre-employment program, and we work with Skills for Rhode Island's Future to help recruit students who we know will be able to be successful. So Skills helps us to review candidates, ensure that they have the appropriate competencies to be successful, and then we will work with them to get them into the program. Similarly, we offer GED in Westerly with one of our nonprofit partners, and so it's an opportunity to go from GED to workforce program to higher ed program, and you can see what's in front of you. So we hope to do the same thing in Woonsocket, where students can walk through the door and they'll feel confident that we will help them find their right path. And most of the individuals are unemployed and underemployed individuals that are adults. They tend to be more the 25 to 65 age range versus the 18 to 22.
Thank you, Amy. One last comment, unless there are other questions. Thank you for the focus on individuals with intellectual development disabilities. I know CVS has had a focus on that. I thank them for doing that. And thank you for having that focus as well. It's at times a population of folks that are overlooked, but clearly the state has a focus on that, CVS has, and whatever work you can do there would be appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last segment for tonight is Abigail Ryder, Vice President of URI, and Ryan Carrillo, Director of Planning and Real Estate at URI, to talk about the URI 25 West Independence Way lease. So
Yes, thank you very much. My name's Abigail Ryder. I'm delighted to be here this evening. We have a request before you to approve essentially an extension of a lease that we currently have at Independence Square. To give a little background on this transaction, the lease, originally the transaction was structured as a ground lease. That is to say, we took land that was owned by URI and leased it to the Independence Square Foundation. They in turn built a building on it, and that building is about 40,000 square feet, and then it's been extended since. We then took a space lease in the building. We leased back some space in the building, and over time, as our health sciences college has grown, we have leased additional suites in the building, and you can see them listed in the resolution before you. The purpose of the transaction this evening is simply that the ground lease has an expiration date of January 31st, 2034. The leases were taken, I'll say, on a much shorter term basis in order to see how the demand and the space need evolved. At this point, it's become quite clear that our health sciences departments that are in this building are very well located. It's right on Route 138. All of them serve the public to some degree, and it gives easy access for the public right off Route 138. So what we're asking is to be able to extend the term of the lease to 2034 to the same day so that they are all coterminous and expire together. The rental rates don't change as a result of this agreement. They remain as they are, but it's just the term that is longer. And I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee.
Abigail, thank you very much. Questions for Abigail? So Abigail, I have one. The foundation is the URI Foundation?
No, sorry, it's the Independence Square Foundation, which is a not-for-profit that has built a couple of locations around the state for not-for-profits to locate in. And there's one in Pawtucket, and then there is this one in Kingston.
So I'm naive. I'm not certain where this is. Where is it in Kingston?
It's right off Route 138 on our campus. Think of it as being sort of tucked in behind Boss Arena, approximately.
Okay.
Right on Route 138.
So somebody other than the URI, it's outside your property. It's outside your property, but somebody else had purchased that property a while back.
Yeah. No, it's actually our property, and we leased the ground. We did a ground lease to the Independence Square Foundation, and they in turn built a building on it, which we then leased space in. Is that helpful?
Yes. So we own the land. We leased the land to build a building. Now we're leasing part of the building from them to
Correct.
The same owner to which we leased the land to.
Yes, correct.
Okay. We're a sublease to a leasee. Okay. Well, let's see.
Right, and what's interesting too is the reason that the term goes to 2034, which is long for a standard building lease, is because to build this building, this addition, Building 3, the Independence Square Foundation obtained federal funding, and the federal funding required a term on the ground lease of at least 34 years. And in fact, we don't occupy the whole building at all, but we're clearly committed to keeping our health services that are public facing in this building, because there's very good public access on Route 138.
Okay. Thank you, Abigail. Any other questions for Abigail? Thank you very much. I believe that concludes our agenda for the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Senator Pearson, seconded by Senator Seveny. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you very much.